Welcome to another Quran study. Today, God willing, we'll be reading from Surah 14, verses 18 to 44. We seek refuge in God alone, away from Satan, the rejected, and from the whispers of jinns and humans alike. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. The allegory of those who disbelieved in their Lord. Their works are like ashes in a violent wind on a stormy day. They gain nothing from whatever they earn. Such is the farthest straying. So those.
Can everyone else mute, please? Some people are not mute.
So.
I think you can mute John yourself from the Jitsi.
Okay.
Click on his name and mute him. He's muted now. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I'm just going to start from the beginning here. So, in the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. The allegory of those who disbelieve in their Lord. Their works are like ashes in a violent wind on a stormy day. They gain nothing from whatever they earn. Such is the farthest straying. Those jinns and humans who stray from the path of God has led towards redemption and are truly following Satan the rejected, right? So God gives this example of what they feel like they're attaining here in this world and how it truly is nothing. There is nothing there. It is just an illusion. It's vanity. So Satan has made it his priority to mislead as many jinns and humans in this life as possible. And we can see this quote in Surah 4, Ayah 119. Satan says, I will mislead them. I will entice them. I will command them to forbid the eating of certain meats by marking the ears of livestock, and I will command them to distort the creation of God. Anyone who accepts the devil as a lord instead of God has incurred a profound loss. And then it continues. He promises them and entices them. What the devil promises is no more than an illusion. So obviously there's many allegories in the Quran that exemplify the illusion of this world and how it is designed to capitalize on our individual vanity. This life and the world are designed to test our acted intentions, and once the test is done, all the work that has been done for this particular life will be non-existent. Like it will be like the ashes in a violent wind on a stormy day. It'll just float away. It'll be as if it didn't exist. This proves the futility in prioritizing this life and this temporary world. So God willing, I'll continue. Verse 19. Do you not realize that God has created the heavens and the earth for a specific purpose? If he wills, he can remove you and substitute a new creation in your place. This is not too difficult for God. So God reminds us in these two verses here that this world is a mere illusion, as mentioned prior, made specifically to test humans and jinns, who must individually act upon one of two paths, right? So path one, which is why we're here, is praising God alone, which implies also submitting to his will. This means upholding scripture, leading a righteous life, and believing and preparing for the day of judgment, which we all know to be inevitable, right? Or B, following other than God, whether it be through our own arrogance and ego, following people around us, false messengers, influencers, politicians, religious leaders, etc., all of which are truly fabrications of our most ardent enemy, Satan the rejected, right? So we have those two paths in place. God has created this universe for us to play out this test, and God willing, will continue. So verse 21, when they all stand before God, the followers will even say to their leaders, we used to follow you. Can you spare us even a little bit of God's retribution? They will say, had God guided us, we would have guided you. Now it is too late. Whether we grieve or resort to patience, there is no exit for us. There's a footnote here from the messenger. Frequently, the Quran talks about the hereafter in past tense. This is because those are future events already witnessed by God, and it will surely come to pass. This further exemplifies that God is the most omniscient, the most omnipresent. Before any of this happened, before this test happened, before our lives happened, God knew what the inevitable outcome was, right? Because everything follows within His will. God in His grace has provided this life as a test through His mercy, right? God could have not allowed us to play out our intentions and instead judge us immediately, right? Because God knew exactly where we're going to be. God knew exactly where everybody was going to fit, whether they were going to suffer the retribution on the day of judgment, or be redeemed by God, right? Instead, God has designed an entire universe, as mentioned beforehand, for us to live a short interim, where we make our intentions manifest, right? Ultimately making us all a judge of our own test as the proof of the lives we've experienced. This takes away all dispute, right? Nobody can turn around and say, oh, I was judged too harsh. If I was actually tested, I would have a better outcome, which inevitably some disbelievers will say, right? Send us back now that we know, right? This is what God kind of has shown us through the Quran. All doubt is taken away through this test, right? And we can no longer say we're judged harshly. We can no longer say that we weren't given a chance. God is the most omniscient, most wise. He knows what's best, and He has given this as an opportunity for us. This should not be taken lightly, obviously, as each day we experience is provided as a mercy and a grace to us from God. So I'll continue verse 22. And the devil will say, after the judgment has been issued, God has promised you the truthful promise, and I promised you, but I broke my promise. I had no power over you. I simply invited you, and you accepted my invitation. Therefore, do not blame me, and blame only yourselves. My complaining cannot help you, nor can your complaining help me. I have disbelieved in your idolizing me. The transgressors have incurred a painful retribution. So it is important to note with this that we are not forced by the devil to do anything. Satan's only power over us are mere whispers, and there is many examples through the Quran that tells us this. It is our ego and our arrogance that allow us to compromise. There are many examples of this in the Quran, as mentioned beforehand. However, God also provides protection to those who seek refuge in Him when we are aware of these whispers. These whispers become extremely more evident throughout our lives the more we choose to submit to God. So, it's good to know that, on one hand, Satan truly has no power over us. However, it is a stark realization that we are either going to be our own detriment, or we are going to be our own redemption. It is truly up to us. Satan has no power over it. He can only whisper. And it is our choice whether or not we allow those whispers to come to fruition, right? Verse 23, as for those who believe and lead a righteous life, they will be admitted into gardens with flowing streams. They abide therein forever. In accordance with the will of their Lord, their greeting therein is peace. Truth versus falsehood. Verse 24. Do you not see that God has cited the example of the good word as a good tree whose root is firmly fixed and its branches are high in the sky? It produces its crop every season as it's designed by its Lord. God thus cites the examples for the people that they may take heed. And the example of the bad word is that of a bad tree chopped at soil level. It has no roots to keep it standing. So God provides an analogy of the truth, which is the good tree. It's fully rooted, it's strong, it has a great foundation, and then the bad tree, right, or falsehood, right? This analogy is exemplified throughout life, right? God has created everything through truth. God is truth. Truth creates, right? As God says, be, and it is. In contrast to truth is falsehood. It's an illusion. It cannot create anything. It exists only to destroy. Destroy perception of something, destroy primarily perception, right? It cannot create anything. It is an illusion. As such, in this analogy, truth is the firmly fixed tree with substance. It has life. It provides shade. It reproduces. It serves as a benefit to all around it. Whereas falsehood, where it's exemplified in this, is the bad tree. It has no life, no roots. It has no foundation, and it ultimately is a rotting piece of wood, right? Destined to disappear into the soil and its surroundings, right? So notice how the bad tree usefulness, which there is none, it's only apparent after its destruction. So much like a moment where a lie has been proven or a falsehood has been proven that it's false. Well, the only benefit from that is that we can learn from that experience, kind of like soil for the good tree. So the only benefit that falsehood can ever be is to be destroyed, right? That would be the end of that analogy. So God willing, I'll continue. Verse 27, God strengthens those who believe with the proven word, in this life and in the hereafter. And God sends the transgressors astray. Everything is in accordance with God's will. So God tells us, obviously, that this life is created to, well, this test is created to defeat falsehood, right? This is exemplified in Surah 21, 16 to 18. We did not create the heavens and the earth and everything between them just for amusement. If we needed amusement, we could have initiated it without any of this, if that is what we wanted to do. Instead, it is our plan to support the truth against falsehood in order to defeat it. Woe to you for your utterances you utter. So God kind of shows that this test, God allows those who choose Satan's path, the path of falsehood, to compromise, to live with the consequence of their destruction and evil, not only in this life, but more so in the hereafter. God lets them delve into their sinfulness, to expose their true nature, right? To build onto it, to feed that falsehood in their own hearts, right? And this is exemplified in Surah 3, Ayah 178. Let not the disbelievers think that we lead them on for their own good. We only lead them on to confirm their sinfulness. They incurred a humiliating retribution. So, God allows these falsifiers, these people whose true intentions and their actions and what they think they're building on in this earth, which is nothing but ash, which inevitably turns into nothing on the day of judgment. He leads them on, so that way they continue to delve into their own sinfulness, into their own pride, into their own ego, into their own arrogance, into their own falsehood. And they feel like they're being rewarded, but ultimately, we see many of the time it becomes their own detriment, right? There's another analogy in the Quran where a man is walking through his vineyard or his palm farm. I don't know the exact word, but God willing, people will remember this analogy. And he says, look at what I've done. I don't think the day of judgment is coming. In fact, if it were, I'm so smart that I could do it even better there, right? So, these people who believe in falsehood, who believe in their ego, who believe in their arrogance, they're led on to their own detriment. So that way their true intentions are lived out for them to witness it, right? Verse 28, they remove their families from God's protection. So these people, these falsifiers. Have you noted those who responded to God's blessings by disbelieving, and thus brought disaster upon their own families? So, once again, God allows these falsifiers to get what they desire in this world for material gain, as mentioned. And there's another analogy in Surah 43, and I think it's verses 33 to 37, where God says, I would give them mansions of silver, right? In fact, let's pull it up. Apologies. Verses 33. So God here refers to the disbelievers, right? And God says, if it were not that all the people might become one disbelieving congregation, we would have granted everyone who disbelieves in the most gracious mansions with silver roofs and stairs upon which they could climb. Their mansions would have impressive gates and luxurious furnishings, also many ornaments. All of these are the temporary materials of this lowly life. The hereafter at your Lord is far better for the righteous. Anyone who disregards the message of the most gracious, we appoint a devil to be his constant companion. So, kind of going in, God gives these things and allows these falsifiers, these disbelievers, to attain things here in this world, to lead them on, to truly expose their true intentions, right? What a horrible thing, right? For those people, because inevitably they will become witnesses to their own demise. And even though all this is given to them, they bring disaster to their families because they're not thankful. They're not thankful to God for everything that they've been given. They've been given all these things, all these material gains, the things that they've wanted, that they've worked so hard. And that's their ego and arrogance. Instead of thanking God, they thank their mentors, their constituents, themselves, their idols, and all are given praise, excluding the one who truly had any power in the matter, and that was God alone. So, it truly becomes their detriment, right? Verse 27, hell is their destiny, wherein they burn. What a miserable end. Idol worship, the mother of all evil. Verse 30, they set up rivals to rank with God and to divert others from his path. Say, enjoy for a while. Your final destiny is hell. Crucial commandments, verse 31. Exhort my servants who believe to observe the contract prayers and to give charity from our provisions to them, secretly and publicly, before a day comes where there is neither trade nor nepotism. So, God provides the example of the bad tree, those who are led astray by God's leave to, for their true inhibitions to come out and for them to be exposed. And God gives a good direct contrast and says, hey, exhort one another to observe the contract prayers, to give the charity, to give provisions. God gives us an example of the path that is in our true interest as people, as individuals, as souls. God tells us to exhort one another, right? So, and you see this constantly throughout the Quran. There's both paths are laid out. What can happen if you do this, and what can happen if you do this? And God gives us, through the truth, such beautiful examples, right? So, verse 32, God is the one who created the heavens and the earth, and he sends down from the sky water to produce all kinds of fruit for your sustenance. He has committed the ships to serve you on the sea in accordance with his command. He has committed the rivers as well to serve you. He has committed the sun and the moon in your service continuously. He has committed the night and the day to serve you. And he gives you all kinds of things that you implore him for. If you count God's blessings, you can never encompass them. Indeed, the human being is transgressing, unappreciative. We have been provided infinite amounts of provisions from God. And everyone can attest to this, right? Yet we tend to focus on which we have not been blessed with, right? Like some of those who have children, you try to provide through God's grace as much as you can for your children, but yet it's never enough. They always want more. Anytime I was just at the supermarket yesterday, and my kids are, oh, can I have this? Can I have this? Can I have candy? Can I have this? They have all they need. They don't need any more, right? And we're like those spoiled children. We nag and we ask for more, all while not being grateful for what has been provided, what is truly needed, right? And because of that, God gives a beautiful example going further into these verses, right? Verse 35. Recall that Abraham said, my Lord, make this a peaceful land, and protect me and my children from worshiping idols. My Lord, they have misled so many people. As for those who follow me, they belong with me. As for those who disobey me, you are forgiver, most merciful. Our Lord, I have settled part of my family in this plantless valley, at your sacred house. Your Lord, they are to observe the contact prayers, so let throngs of people converge upon them, and provide for them all kinds of fruits that they may be appreciative. Our Lord, you know whatever we conceal and whatever we declare. Nothing is hidden from God on earth, nor in the heavens. Praise be to God for granting me, despite my old age, Ishmael and Isaac. My Lord answers the prayers. So God provides an example of an appreciative servant, right? He's given us the example of those who are unappreciative, those who are like those nagging children who just ask and ask and ask and are never appreciative of what the infinite blessings that God has given. And here's Abraham, right? He does ask for blessings. He does ask for provisions. However, the provisions he asks for are to help in the serving of God alone, and to help those who seek to serve God a place of refuge. Abraham's prayer in itself is humble, right? He does not, come across as a naggy child, right? That one kid who just asks for more, but the provisions he's asking for are truly in seeking for God's favor. His request in itself, his request for provisions in itself are appreciative. As Abraham seeks only God's favor, he doesn't ask for the materials of this world. One could argue the plants, right? Like he's asking for fruits, but there's to give appreciation to those who come to observe the contact prayers in this plantless valley, right? So ultimately, even what he asks for is to serve God alone, right? And that's a true servant, a humble servant, an appreciative servant, right? The contact prayers, gift from God, verse 40. Abraham continues, my Lord, make me one who consistently observes the contact prayers, and also my children. Our Lord, please answer my prayers. My Lord, forgive me and my parents and the believers on the day when the reckoning takes place. Do not ever think that God is unaware of what the transgressors are doing. He only respites them until a day where the eyes are stare in horror. So the most gracious tells us, as an example of those who are unappreciative, of those rootless trees, the disbelievers, right? That those who prioritize this world on the day of judgment will stare in horror. And the reason why is because everything will become evident, that their lives were wasted. They sought only the benefits of this world, and you hear these sayings, these idioms, I'm going to be successful by hook or by crook, or it's a dog eat dog world, right? These mentalities, and they're hoisted on these pedestals as to what is a truly successful life, right? And truly, these people, they forget about God in this life, and it will become a horrible realization. They're going to be resurrected, and their eyes, it'll be an absolute remorse, a shock, right? Imagine justifying a whole life of sinfulness and falsehood for your entire lifespan, only to find that was worth nothing. It was like ash in a stormy wind. And now you face the limitless interim of hell. Suffering and retribution are essentially what you worked your entire life for. What a horrible moment. What a horrible destiny. Verse 43. As they rush out of the graves, their faces will be looking upward. Their eyes will not even blink, and their minds will be horrified. God sends his commands through his messengers. Verse 44. He shall warn the people of the day when the retribution comes to them. Those who transgressed will say, Our Lord, give us one more respite. We will then respond to your call and follow the messengers. Did you not swear in the past that you will last forever? Yeah, we see the contrast of the believers and the non-believers, the appreciative and the non-appreciative, the truthful and those who are false. The only one who has power over our lives is God. But God helps those who are humble, who are appreciative, and who are truthful and uphold the truth and who submit to God's will, right? Versus those who are arrogant, who are egotistical, who falsify, who live their life by hook or by crook. The only difference is those who follow the path of God or follow the whispers. The whispers. And think of how truly insignificant a whisper is. Who follow the whispers of Satan, the most rejected, our most ardent enemy. Right? May God guard us away from those whispers. Let us seek refuge in God away from our most ardent enemy and guide us to continue on forward, seeking only God's redemption and mercy. With that being said, God willing, I believe that is the last verse, 44. Any questions or concerns?
Well, sure, thank you. Yeah, if there are any other comments or questions, usually we do, it takes longer, but I think the brother's finished, so if there are any comments or questions.
MashaAllah, beautiful story. Thank you, Brother Joseph.
MashaAllah, God bless you. MashaAllah, brother, God bless you.
God bless you all.
So I have a couple of comments. I wanted to comment on the verses we are reading about Satan's promise, and find it interesting that every time there's another verse where Satan is quoted, saying to God that he will promise them, and and God says he'll share in their money and their children, and we see that one of the things I can't help noticing every time I read it is how Satan does the promising. I mean, it's it isn't really these are promises, right? For example, we see that Satan says, well, if you believe that Jesus is your savior and he will intercede on your behalf, I promise you that you will enter paradise, right? Or say that if you just believe Muhammad is going to intercede, he's going to get you out of hell, and you can continue to do whatever you want in this world, in other words. And another very good example is we see the human injection in the Bible, where Satan is talking, obviously, talking about Abraham and the covenant of circumcision, so-called covenant of circumcision, right? And it's a covenant. Obviously, God's covenant was different from Satan's covenant, right? So he replaced it with his covenant. And so all these are promises, literal promises that Satan makes to his constituents. Now, obviously, people who follow these things are following Satan, and His promises. And so, when these people don't go to heaven, for example, all the people who think Jesus is going to save them if they just believe in Him as their Lord, He's going to tell this exact thing. He says, "I promise you, but I broke my promise." And as it says in verse 22. And so, praise be to God. I mean, there's Satan's promise, and then there's God's promise, right? And it's amazing that also in the same, on the same page, like around the same verses, we see about the people removing their families from God's protection. So they responded to God's blessing by disbelieving and brought disaster upon their own families, removed their own families from God's protection. So in the context of what we were referring to earlier, like talking about circumcision, God gives them a perfectly intact, good baby, and then they disbelieve, follow their idols, and right away, at birth, they inflict the child with physical harm and amputate a part of their body and disfigure it permanently. So it causes permanent damage to the child. Sometimes, children end up dying too. But other times, obviously they, at the very least, they end up with physical damage for the rest of their lives. And then, in general, when people believe in idol worship, I mean, they are removing their families from God's protection. And the Messenger of the Covenant, really gives some great examples about that. We have the example of, Rabbi Kushner, who, blasphemed about God and said that God is not able to control everything. And his son ended up with progeria disease, right? And as a result, he died at the age of 14. And so similarly, when we have children and families that we are responsible for, they're kids, so they're not responsible at that time, but we are responsible for their protection. And so when we sin and fall out of God's grace, we bring disaster on our families. I mean, you see, for example, people in like warden places where people are oppressed, and how those children are suffering and dying. As a result, obviously, it's part of God's mercy that those children that are dying under 40. But at the same time, those parents are out of God's protection, and they're also suffering and miserable, right? And so God has given us this formula to, save ourselves.
Don't forget the promise that He gave our ancestors, right? Adam and Eve,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Oh no,
Yeah, exactly.
God's on. You won't die if you eat this. You're going to be like angels, right?
Eternal existence.
Yeah. So, and it's proof, right? Like regardless of what God promised. I mean, God promises is the truth, right? We know this inherently, but it's all falsehood. It's that rootless tree that Satan gives us as an opportunity, right? And how sad how unappreciative we are when we side with him, whether it be through a small compromise or whatever it may be. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mashallah, yeah. Well, I also have another comment, but I don't want to take up everybody's. I don't want to monopolize. So if anybody else has any other comments, I'll let them go first. No one? Okay. So, my other comment was about, Abraham asking God for provisions here. And I just wanted to also add for people watching, people who are not maybe clear about this, that, I think, like, you can ask God for anything. Like, say you need a job or a business or whatever it is, or you need something that you like. There's nothing wrong with asking God for things, as long as your priorities are in the right place, you understand, and you understand that God is the one who's providing these things. I mean, there's asking God for anything is a form of supplication, right? But what we should rather do is ask God for a righteousness, ask God for things that matter. So our priorities are in the right place, right? If I'm asking God for money all the time and not righteousness, I mean, it shows that there's something wrong with me, because I don't value righteousness as much as I value money, perhaps, So we should ask God for righteousness, ask God for the hereafter, ask God for things that we really need, and everything else God will give us anyways. But it's not wrong, which is the part I wanted to highlight. It's not wrong to ask God for material things, because obviously for you to ask God for anything, you have to have some kind of belief in God, right? So it's an act that requires belief. It's a form of worship, provided that you're not imploring any idols. Now, you cannot do that. You cannot ask Muhammad or Jesus or a saint for anything. People go to saints, and if they can have children, for example, you see people going to saints and asking the saints to help them, dead saints, to help them, have children, and then they go and thank those idols, or if they have a disease or something and they need to get cured. That's something we can't do, right? But we can implore God for anything whatsoever we need in this world. There's nothing wrong with it. But our priorities have to be in the right order. And that's it. No one else has any comments? Okay. Justin, do you have a comment?
Well, brother, I've been speaking most of the time. I don't know what else to say.
So I thought maybe.
But I I think it's always beautiful to have these studies and kind of read verses. I'm sure all of us have read these verses time and time again.
Noise.
But what's beautiful is the fact that every time you read it, you can extract something that you didn't see beforehand, and I think that's beautiful. Like obviously we've kind of talked about that comment every time, but it's always neat to see every time reading it. It's like a fresh new verse, right? Like you remember it slightly from last time you read it or whatever, but the meaning is so much more. And it's just beautiful, right? I just wanted to say that it's always fun studying these verses and seeing new life in them every time.
Yeah, mashallah, that's the beauty of Quran. Mashallah, God has all the guidance, so much guidance in this book, and it never gets old or boring, and we continue to learn new things as we read the same verses again and again. Inshallah. Well, yes, I would definitely encourage other people who have not commented to, participate, make some comments, God willing, especially people who have been silent for a while, you know. So, definitely, please, it's one thing to listen to a study, but it's another thing to participate and have comments so we can all learn from each other and, exchange ideas, learn about each other's perspectives, God willing.
Brother, I had a question. Uh, I asked. We spoke about this in the Turkish study as well, and it was about the verse where the messenger of the covenant was explaining about the end of the world, and he was reading from the Quran, and he was saying, oh, "Please correct me if I'm wrong," but he was saying, "What a blessing that we have given you, O Muhammad, the 7 pairs." I don't know if this was the verse, but it was in the video where he mentions. So my question was, how is that a blessing towards Muhammad? Because he didn't know, right, when the end is. The information came with Dr. Rashad. So how does this make it a blessing for him? This information.
Mm-hmm.
So, Michael, there's the verse that is a blessing, or you mean the messenger when he talks that it was a blessing that God gave? Because I remember if I remember correctly, the verse that we have given you. So it was the one that Brother Salim shared today. It didn't have blessing in it. We're giving you 7 pairs.
So this is talking about Surah 15, verse 87.
Yeah.
So
that one?
Yeah, we have given you the 7 pairs and the great Quran.
Yeah.
Yes, but so there was the other thing what he said, and he said that this was a blessing. And while I was while I was listening to it, so I remembered I wanted to ask about this, but I don't remember exactly which verse it was. He said something about a blessing, that it was a blessing for him.
Mm-hmm. I think the 7 pairs, if we look at the end of the world, right? So this goes, it starts by marking Jesus' date of birth is used as a marker here, right? So as such, it's not connected to Muhammad, right? And so I'm trying to. It says the first 14 says. So they are fantastic as you see the miracle. God is telling Muhammad what a blessing it was that God gave him the 7 pairs.
Yes.
Now when the Quran was revealed, there were no numbers, right? So you're saying, how is this a blessing?
Yes, this. Thank you, brother. Yes, this is my question. why does this make it a blessing for him? Since like he didn't know what when the end will be, and should we understand?
It's a blessing for us. You know, it doesn't say it's a blessing for Muhammad, right?
So God is telling Muhammad what a blessing it was that God gave him these 7 pairs. So
no, God doesn't tell. God doesn't say that though, by the way.
Oh, he doesn't say
like
that
when
it's a blessing.
Of course, it's
him.
A blessing. Is it in a verse you're reading?
Well,
of course, these are the words of the verse.
No, these are the words of Dr. Rashad. These
yes,
so he says the miracle of God is telling Muhammad what a blessing it was that God gave him these 7 pairs.
Yeah, but it's a blessing for everybody, right? God gave Muhammad the thing, but it was a blessing. But it's a blessing not just for Muhammad; it's a blessing for all of us in that sense.
For the ones who believe in it.
Yeah, like he also gave him the Quran, right? So God gave Muhammad the Quran. It was a blessing, but it wasn't just a blessing for him. It's a blessing for all humanity, right?
Okay.
Same way.
Okay.
So
that is more clear. And like you know, putting all those things into text, it's really amazing that you can just search for a word and then go exactly to that point and specific thing. So this is very nice to use. MashaAllah.
MashaAllah, brother. So I think, yes, I think so. What Brother Suleiman and Sister Mona said is correct. I mean, the verse says that we have given you the 7 pairs, you know, and it's not saying that like it's not in the word of Quran that it's being said that it's a blessing. But what Dr. Khalifa is saying, that this is a blessing that God gave to Muhammad. At that moment, Muhammad was not aware of the usage of these 7 pairs, and didn't know about these letters and what they really meant, and had no idea what was going to come out of them 1400 years down the road. Okay, but it was a blessing that it was given to him. It was like a revelation that came from God, to Muhammad, and down the road, it became a blessing for all of us. That then we understood that, okay, this is the meaning of these mysterious letters that are not mysterious anymore to us, because we understand the meaning behind them. SubhanAllah.
Well, SubhanAllah, I think, and that's the reason why Dr. Khalifa is highlighting this part, that it was a blessing, because he's saying that God gave weight and importance to him, and by mentioning it, so it's a blessing. So meaning there was a reason behind these initials, and now we know what the reason is, right?
Yeah, mashallah. So I'm also wondering, like, when these verses are being revealed to Muhammad, like things that he didn't understand, or can we say, I don't know if we can say that, because like the 7 pairs, after Dr. Rashada, we clearly understand what it's meant for, right? But so Muhammad understood it differently, probably, or maybe he didn't understood it at all. Can we say that? What these 7 pairs was?
Well, we at least know that God separated the information about the mathematical code, right? There is some hadiths available, but we can't. It's still kind of like borderline. Conjecture, because nothing is confirmed by the Quran. And so there is some hadith, right, that talks about the end of the world, but we can't really rely on it.
also, yes, there are verses that, in the Quran, there is a verse where God says, do not explain the verses. We are the one that are going to explain them. So there were some verses that there was no explanation for them at the time when they were being revealed to the Prophet. So, like, I don't know, for example, this, all these signs of the end of the world, the Gog and Magog and the splitting of the moon and things like that. So at the time, they didn't have much knowledge about it. So, there were some verses that the explanation were about to be done by God at a certain time. So, yes, there were some verses that probably at the time they couldn't explain it as such. So that's the whole point of submission. You submit, you accept it, but explanation will come at the time.
Yeah, so you have like verses where God says they ask you about this and that, and God says tell them, and gives the answer to their questions. So when these verses were revealed to Muhammad, most probably these people were also asking about it, right? Like when Dr. Rashad Khalifa was alive, they were he was saying things and he was explaining and telling it to them. Like there's of course a difference between Dr. Rashad and Muhammad, because Muhammad his job was not to explain actually, but these people of course were asking questions. But then God still gave them the answer, of course, right? Because they were asking about the end of the end time, right? And then he was in the verse we can read that it says, no, only God knows, and the ones whom He wants to know. So basically, with that, He actually God answered them by not telling them when the end of the world is, because it was not supposed for them to know, right?
Yes, it was destined for our time, to know the end of the world. And so if you pay attention, this 7 pairs is mentioned in the section of the appendix 25, which is about the end of the world. And it's actually used as one of the, measures for the determining the end of the world that we have here. We have given you the 7 pairs and the great Quran, okay? And then we know that these 7 pairs, one of the meanings is that we have, 7 pairs means basically 14, okay? So we have 14 different combinations of the letters in the beginning of 29 initial surahs, okay? So these are used as initials, so we have 14 different combinations. And 14 letters of the Arabic language is used in these 14 sets. Only 14 letters are used here in these 14 sets, okay? And then we have in this appendix, I said that while hadith is forbidden as a source of religious teaching, it can be a useful source of history. We can derive a lot of information about historical events and local customs and traditions during the early centuries of Islam, okay? And then in Al-Suyuti's Itqan, first printing 1318 AH, volume 2, page 10, is that famous hadith that talks about, the Jews of Medina went to the Prophet and said, your Quran is initialed with ALM, and these initials determine the lifespan of your religion. So this is, we're not using this as a source of, basically guidance. But since the messenger of God, brought it here in the appendix, we can just take a look at it and see what they said, probably said, and what these things back then might have had the meaning for, because these letters were numbers, at that time they were used as numbers before the numbers were created. So basically, probably they were treating them as guessing. Numbers.
Yeah, yes. But those were like what they were doing. It was guesswork, and
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and by this we can also have some kind of a sense of what kind of on what they were thinking of, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
When looking at these letters, and this 7 pairs was also like the 14th centuries, right?
Yes.
Right. Not only letters, but also the centuries.
Yes. Correct. 14th centuries. Yes. Yes. I mean, I think it's pretty much clear cut, and back then even Muhammad didn't know the end of the world. Okay, so we can say it for a fact that he didn't know the end of the world, and the only miracle that he had was the Quran. Was the revelation of Quran to him. That was the only miracle that he had. And contrary to what traditional Muslims say that he knew the future and stuff like that. No, Muhammad didn't know the future. And what we know right now, the information that we have right now, is way more than what Muhammad knew back then. And but nevertheless, Quran was revealed to him, and he knew the verses of the Quran, and whatever was mentioned in the Quran, he knew it as well. Okay, so, mashallah.
Yeah, it's also very amazing, right? That for the people at the time, when they look at Muhammad, he saying that he is a prophet of God, and he's saying that this book is from God, and then reading them these verses that were given by God to him, but he himself not knowing exactly what those things mean. Like, so this should be also some kind of an they should give them some kind of a sense that, okay, this book, like, it's really not written by Muhammad himself. It's a revelation from God. Because who is going to, like, write down a book himself, say that it's from God, and then, tell the people, yeah, like, these are the verses I got, and, I don't know what they mean. Like, it's not really logical, in a way, for someone to say that that it's from God, while, like, if it is not. And I had also one other question about the video where Dr. Rashad Khalifa talks about where he says that this is the most important khutbah he has given so far. And there he says, I came to a conclusion. He says, I made a conclusion, or I came to a conclusion that this is about that God is running everything. But this information is, like, from God, right? It's not just his own opinion. This is something that God told him to tell us, basically. Should we understand this differently? That's my question, basically. Because he says, I came to a conclusion.
Could you please say one more time, brother?
Yeah, so you remember the video where Dr. Rashad Khalifa is talking about the topic, God is running everything? And there he says, this is the most important khutbah I have ever given until now. And then he says, recently I came to a conclusion.
Okay, so I think I brought this one. Is this the one you meant?
Yes, I have delivered so far. Yes.
Okay.
So please pay attention. I will try. Yes, this one, brother.
Okay, which part? I have come to a very important conclusion about believing in God. Okay.
Yes, he said, I have come to a very important conclusion about believing in God. Okay. So I remember that, also in the appendices and in the Muslim perspective, like, when you see there, he gives a clear information about what his tasks are, right? He says, okay, this is my task, give information about the end of the world, etc. But here he says, like, I have come to a very important conclusion. Is this, like, while he was saying this, this is, of course, a way of talking, right? But this information is actually from God.
Correct.
Through him.
Yes.
Okay, so, but when he says, I have come to a very important conclusion, then we shouldn't separate this, what he's saying, from what God wants us to hear, right? Is that the correct way of understanding this?
So you're saying, what are you trying to say? Like, are you saying that he shouldn't have said it, or what?
No, that's not what I'm saying. So, like, you can say the same thing. You can say like this, right? So, God has given me, or like, one of my jobs that I have got from God is to tell you that God is running everything is the most thing, instead of saying I came to that conclusion. But of course, we know from the Quran that we shouldn't separate what the messenger says of what God is saying, because basically they are the same thing, right?
Mm. So, okay, well,
when he's giving the message, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Like,
So, no, I mean, so the thing is, we know that, okay, so we know that God is a source of all knowledge, right? Even if God inspired someone to invent a machine or something, right? The source of knowledge is God, anyways. So the messenger saying that he has come to a conclusion, I mean, like all of us, right? I mean, I can say that too. Let's say, right? Like I'm going through circumstances and seeing things or reading verses and contemplating on them, right? And understanding that different aspects of the message that God has put in the Quran, that has really verses that have been given to Muhammad, right? And I can say, well, I concluded this, and the messenger can say the same thing, because also you have to know that there's a Muhammad, there's Rashad the man and there's Rashad the messenger too, and Rashad the man is also following the message that God is giving. He's required to believe in the message, right? And he's contemplating and he's thinking. But I mean, going back to your comment about the most important sermon, there were many, many other things there, many other things in that sermon, right? Including if I'm not mistaken, things about Satan coming and things regarding that side of things as well, So, but knowing that God is running everything, and Him saying that I came to a conclusion, to me doesn't violate any principles or anything like that.
but I was not asking if that was violating it.
No, but I'm saying like it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Because he was a messenger of God, and of course we know that there we shouldn't separate these two, like, because he is doing his messenger as a job. He's doing his job at that moment.
But sometimes it is the case that, for example, you say something, okay, so we believe that, in the Quran, everything which is in the Quran is from God, okay, right? Word by word is from God. But then we might not have like complete understanding of it, or the depth of understanding from something that we get down the road, okay? Possibly it could have meant that Rashad Khalifa as a person, okay, have come to the conclusion, or I understood it better than before, Probably that's what it might mean. It's not that he has come to a separate conclusion from what God has told him to deliver to us, and he has delivered to us what he has delivered to us as a messenger of God, but then he as a person came to the conclusion that this is what it really means. This is the depth of the understanding of the meaning of the word. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Maybe the same thing as with the zakat. Like, there is a video where he says, like, we need to give it once a year.
Zakat is a different thing.
And then, and then we have another video where he says, it was clearly there in the Quran. Like, this is very logical. Like, so then we can say, like, it is really a part of the whole messengership, and God is, giving the message through his messenger in these kind of ways.
And it's the case that, the message even came to him in parts, part by part it came to him. And if you remember that there was one of the videos that in the sermons, he was reporting on an event that happened between him and like a Sunni Muslim that contacted him. And that person, jokingly said that, what was the last thing that Gabriel brought to you? What was the last revelation that Gabriel brought to you? And he said that righteous people don't die, the believers don't die, they go straight to heaven. Okay, so that was a part of information that came down the road. It was a part of information that he didn't know as a messenger of God, but it was given to him, and he reported it to us as well. Okay, so the same goes with zakat. The first videos that he made, he said that, okay, once a year you should pick one date for yourself, I don't know, 1st of January or whatever, and then calculate your net worth and pay it. And then down the road in one of other videos, and not only one video, several places, he mentioned that, okay, it should be basically upon every paycheck, and he brought the verse Yawm al-Hisada, meaning on the day that, the day of harvest. So, and we are not harvesting, wheat or corn anymore. We're just harvesting, paycheck. So when we are getting the paycheck, pay it. And if you think that it's not a manageable amount, don't go beyond the month. Okay, so then it was corrected for us, and then we understood that, okay, so when we get a paycheck, we have to pay it, and we shouldn't go beyond the month for paying the zakat, So that was the part of information that came to him as the messenger of messenger of God down the road, But this, I think, is different from what you're saying, brother, because sometimes it's the case that, if information was given to him as the messenger of the God, and he reported them to us, but then he, as a human himself, got a better understanding of what it really meant, And yes, as a man, right? Does it make sense?
You said, Also, there's something I want to share, right? And I mean, let's just take it for what it is. I mean, these are not really my views per se, But when people observe, people have. I mean, it concerns them a little bit, right? So I think we just have to kind of keep that into perspective, so that when we're conveying these things to other people, that it doesn't come off that way, right? So what I mean by that is, like, so we have a Quran study, right? And we're here. I'm not saying anybody's doing anything wrong, but I'm just saying, like, we have to be aware of this idea and perspective, so that if we are aware, we can address it better, and we can present things in a better light, for people to not have a misunderstanding or anything of that nature, right? So, we gather here to read Quran, right? Our objective is to read the verses of the Quran and talk about those verses and understand it better. If there's off-topic questions, we talk about that, right? Now, what happens is, and I'm not saying anybody's really doing that, but there is this perception out there from other groups, right? So we have to be aware of it. So, but then when we have all the transcripts of these studies, the transcripts are there to help us obviously understand the messenger, understand the message, have a better idea of the verses we're reading, right? So when we have a transcript, let's say, right, in front of us, and we're reading from the transcript, and then we start talking about the transcript, it may come off to a lot of people as if we have kind of delved away from reading the Quran to studying the videos and audios in a way that they're not meant to be used, right? And so it may repel some people a little bit. So we just have to be. I'm not saying it's wrong for us to discuss these things, but I think at some point we have to be mindful of that we don't give the impression that we're kind of deviating in some ways, right? Instead of spending time, because the devil will push us to extremes, right? So we have to be also aware of that as well, because I have seen groups that went in that direction, right? And they slowly deviated in a way now that if they see verses in the Quran saying one thing, and then they see message from the messenger, from the audios or the videos, even though the messenger is saying the same thing, and his source is the Quran, if they find some areas of doubt or some kind of a loophole in some way, like, they will go towards that and forget what the Quran is saying. For example, like, just one example is the Qibla, right? There's so many places in the Quran where God is telling us to face the Qibla, wherever you are, face the Qibla, face the Qibla. So many times God has said it in the Quran, you have to face the Kaaba, right? And then there's audios or video. There's a video where they had an issue. It was pertaining to that context, and they're praying in a certain direction because of the reason. But they're going by that video, and they're saying, no, in that video the messenger is saying this, and they're praying in this other direction, so we can do that too. And then they make it the norm to not even pray towards the Kaaba, knowingly, as a whole group on a permanent basis in a masjid, right? And so there's many precedents of things that have happened like that. For example, God tells us to be reverent for our contact prayers, and there's several places in the Quran where this is being said. Even the Messenger has talked about it. But then they'll find a place where the Messenger is talking about it in some weird way, and they take it out of context and come to another conclusion, right? So because of some of these precedents that have already been set, bad precedents, people are sensitive to this idea, and we should also be careful because we don't want Satan to push us in that direction either. So I think what I'm trying to say is we just have to be mindful of those things, and remember that we are studying the Quran, right? So our goal is to understand the Quran, discuss those verses, and when we're also discussing these situations, to be mindful of this perception out there, and mindful of this possibility of us, falling in that trap as well, right? So I just wanted to put it out there for all of us. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, but mashallah. And also we hear while we were doing the Quran studies, and you remember there was this guy writing down that we were also talking about Dr. Rashad. They see this also as like they believe in the so-called hadith, but then they say, okay, but you guys are following the hadith of Rashad, So, but in that concept, you're totally right, brother. Mashallah. Thank you for reminding me.
Mashallah, something I think we should remember is that always when the Messenger of Covenant mentioned something, his realization or something, it was always followed by like a surah from the Quran, a verse from the Quran. So he always brought the source where he got that realization. So it wasn't like out of his head. Things were verified through the Quran, and this is something we should remember. I actually wanted to ask, so Brother Suleiman, are you suggesting that it's wrong to show the transcripts, or is it wrong to ask, deviating questions on the transcript?
I didn't say it's wrong. I just said that as we discuss these things, like, we have to be mindful that we are not portraying that idea, that people have, or we are not falling in that trap of other people, So just do it with caution. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and we have an example that happened before.
Mm-hmm.
Like this guy was saying, "Oh, you were like talking all the time about Rashad,"
Mm-hmm.
So that is some kind of an example of how people are conceiving, like while we're doing the Quran studies. And so we should be careful about. That's what I understood what Brother Suleiman said.
Yeah, mashallah. But sometimes also the transcripts are blessing. But that's
they are always.
Yeah, I know. But people who want to perceive things wrong, they always do it wrong, whether we do it or not. I know we should be cautious, but the thing is that, like, these days I'm getting comments from a disbeliever or someone who claims to be a submitter, under the Farsi Quran studies, who is also commenting on the translation. Like saying so many nonsense about the messenger and the translation, and then we are coming up to that person as people following the wrong translation. So people always make those comments and those nonsense comments, but may God protect us and also help us to make good judgments and use the sources we have, and appreciate them, inshallah.
Yeah, of course. And as I said before, we have to remember that devil pushes people to the extremes. So that example that you're talking about, this person, they're on one extreme, right? And then it could drive you to another extreme. Like, for example, somebody could come in a very repulsive way, tell you, "Oh, you're having Rashad studies now," and this is a real comment. They're saying to other people that they were having Rashad studies. I'm like, "No, we're not having Rashad studies. This is a blessing, and this and that." And then, but it's not something that happened overnight. But they really got pushed in a different in the other extreme.
Yeah.
So we don't want to fall in either one of those extremes. Is what I'm saying. Having said that, obviously, it's a tremendous blessing for us to have the transcripts. A tremendous blessing for us to have audios and videos. But I think as we share them, as we talk about them, as we discuss these things, we have to understand the perspective and put it in that same light. Like so people don't take it that way either. We have to do our part, right? I mean, people are going to take whatever they're going to take and say whatever they say. But we should always try to do our part. And also, mashallah, what was said earlier about cross-referencing with verses from Quran. The messenger always cross-referenced with verses from Quran. And so it's a good exercise for us. Like if the messenger has said something, like we also talk about the verses based on which verses he has said it. So people know that, his source was the Quran and our source is the Quran. And their source should be the Quran. So we portray the right message to people also.
And also, there's one other point that we have to bear in mind, and that is the point of, that Brother Jafar mentioned, that some people might say that, okay, now you're following the hadith of Rashad. This comment that person has made is nonsense, because when we say hadith is the basically hearsays of hearsays. I mean hearsays and rumors related to somebody. That's what is hadith. And the first record of hadith was 250 years after the death of Prophet Muhammad, and that was over 8 generations of the dead. Okay, but what we are paying attention to and what we are looking at is the exact words of what Dr. Rashad Khalif, as the messenger of God during his life, said. Okay, he was a messenger of God. He was a messenger of the covenant, and he's now martyred. He's gone. He's not among us anymore. But we have the audios. We have the videos. And when we do have these, that's basically a blessing that we have. It's not hadith. It's just basically extra information, extra explanation about the verses of the Quran, so that we understand the context of the verses better and understand what they are, sending to us. And also, one of the jobs of the messenger of the covenant was to unify and purify the whole message. Okay, so basically, we have the whole message from the beginning of, time, from Adam, the prophet, and then Noah, and then coming down to Abraham, okay, and then coming down to all the prophets, Joseph, Jacob, Moses, and then Jesus, and then we come down to Muhammad, and everything is unified and purified. That's why we have references to Deuteronomy. That's why we have references to, Psalms of David, okay? And if people don't like that, that's fine. People might want to believe whatever they want to believe. That's absolutely fine. But this is what we believe. And inshallah, God helps us that we stand by it, And we shouldn't get intimidated by what people say and what people think, about what we are doing in our sessions. And I think that if we, like, for example, don't ask questions that, Brother Jafar just asked, then we would at some point limit ourselves in even daring to think. I'm not saying that we should go to the extreme. I'm saying that we come to these sessions to gather around, to look at the verses of the Quran, and to get a better understanding of the verses. Or else it would be like, for example, one of those traditional Quran study sessions that people gather around and start reading the Arabic. Nobody understands anything, and everybody says Allah, Allah.
Yeah. No, you're right. But the thing is, to be honest, like, we read a lot of verses too, and so, let's say if I didn't mention this part, right? I mean, and let's say we didn't touch on it, and someone saw our study, they would easily come to the conclusion that these people, they read. I don't know how many verses we read, right? 50 verses or however many we read, and 90% of the time they heard us talking about the messenger, what he said in those 2 videos, for example, right? So we don't want to set that precedent either, So I think what you're saying is obviously right. There's nothing wrong with it, and I always stood by this, and I believe there's nothing wrong with it, as long as we're not extricating anything from those audios and videos and that is not in the Quran and making it a source of law. That's our guideline, right? But I think we should do our fair part, to also, before we even delve into off-topic questions, to read the verses, to have questions about the verses, and then as we have exhaustively talked about those verses, then we go to off-topic questions, then we go into these other questions, right? So that's why I said it's important to know about that perception that, we have a Quran study and we read a lot of verses, and, we also talk about those verses. A lot of times when we, this, the people are not used to seeing transcripts, and now that we have transcripts and put it in front of people, it doesn't look the same, right, as you talking from a video and seeing. So we have to understand that. Anyways, I know Brother Justin has his hand up for a while, and I shouldn't have commented before him because I know his hand was up. I'm sorry. So Brother Justin, please go ahead and share what you're going to say.
Thank you, brother. I just wanted to reiterate that it's good to use the messenger as a reference. However, it is an explanation of the religious guideline of the Quran, right? And I agree with Brother Suleiman in saying that in a Quran study, the focus should be the Quran. And don't get me wrong, it's good to talk about what the messenger has brought across, but I think it can err on the side of maybe not this generation, but future generations of idolatry in the future, right? We see this with every messenger, with every prophet, right? The whole point of a prophet, the whole point of a messenger is to bring across God's message and explaining it, which is great, and it is needed. However, to make the messenger or the prophet a focal point, I think would be an error on all our parts, especially for the future generations. So I understand we must work with great tact when observing how a messenger brings across, because if we become so focused on what they have brought forward, are we truly focusing on them explaining the message of God, or are we truly focusing on them as an individual? And this errs on the side of distinction, and God forgive us if we ever do that. So I just wanted to explain that as well. Like it is imperative that we are very careful in this aspect.
Yeah, mashallah. There is also another reason why, for example, in this specific case, I was asking things. When I talk to people and then we're discussing the message and these kind of stuff, so people also come up with questions. They were asking, okay, how should we understand this? And sometimes, of course, we give them the answers with the information and the knowledge that we had at that point, at that moment. And we don't want to make any mistakes. We don't want to say things that are not true. And of course, after going into these studies for so long, there are sometimes moments, where we don't know exactly what to say or how to behave. And that can also happen. Also maybe in the future. So. I think we shouldn't, we should still be able to ask, of course, but I understand what Brother Suleiman was saying. And one of the other things that I was thinking of was there is also this voice recording where someone was telling the people, listen, when the messenger is around, we need to, don't talk, respect him, etc. And then in the end, that Rashad was explaining to them why that was so important, because he says when someone comes, when someone is at the door, looking at you guys and us, and looking how you guys are behaving towards the messenger, and if it's not correct, he will just go and leave, and that would be the reason why he is leaving. So there is definitely something about being careful with these things. That's how I understood it.
Yeah, it sets the bad precedent, and the person ends up disbelieving, and then you go to hell because you were responsible for this person's being repulsed from the path, right? That's the part he's explaining. So, like, your works are nullified. He talks about 49:1, and he's explaining that, your works could be nullified because you could set a bad precedent. They can come and see how you're behaving with the messenger and getting repulsed from that, and ends up disbelieving, and then his sin of disbelieving will fall on you because you helped him in that direction, So you have to be careful and being respectful. That's the one you were talking about, right? The sermon.
Yeah, and we are sitting in a room, right, in an online room, but the door is widely open for everyone. So so in this specific situation, yeah, definitely it's good to keep in mind, at least, in how we are dealing with these things.
Exactly.
Thank you, brother.
MashaAllah. Speaking of talking about the verses, we have in audio number 27 that Dr. Rashad Khalifa actually talked about these verses, starting from verse 19, and then move forward to the next page. Even I think we have up to verse 33 or something. There's something really interesting about verse 20 here. God willing, I will read it here. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Starting from verse 19, do you not realize that God has created the heavens and the earth for a specific purpose? If he wills, he can remove you and substitute a new creation in your place. This is not too difficult for God. And one of the things that Dr. Rashad Khalifa was actually paying attention to was actually the Arabic section of this this verse. That verse 20 says, وَمَا ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ بِعَزِيزٍ. This is not too difficult for God, to remove you and substitute a new creation in your place. In this sense that we, like humans, this is my understanding, in the sense that, like, the humans think that, they are the kings of their lives, they can do whatever they want to do, and nothing can threaten them, nothing can create problem for them. But the thing is that it's really easy for God to, remove us and then substitute a new creation in our place, subhanallah. And then in the next verse, we have on the day of resurrection, when they all stand before God, the followers will say to the leaders, we used to follow you. Can you spare us even a little bit of God's retribution? They will say, had God guided us, we would have guided you. Now it is too late. Whether we grieve or resort to patience, there is no exit for us. And the thing is that these are in past tense. Basically these are quotation marks that are around the parts that people say on the day of resurrection. And as Dr. Khalifa mentioned, that it is the case in the Bible as well as the Quran that many parts we have that they speak in past tense, to indicate that this is a prophecy that is sure to come to pass. So basically it will happen. And from our point of view, because we are timed creatures, and then from the viewpoint of God, it has already happened, and this is a prophecy that is sure come to pass. MashaAllah. And if anybody has any comments here, I will stop, but then there are other verses as well that we can talk about as well, inshallah.
So which prophecy are you talking about? Sorry, I didn't
Yeah, the prophecy of the fact that these verse 21 is basically people stand before God.
Yeah.
That's the prophecy that is come to pass definitely. And and the followers will say to the leaders, that's the quotation that has already happened on the day of resurrection. It hasn't happened to us yet because it is in our future, but from the viewpoint of God, who is the creator of time, it has already happened and it has been witnessed by God. and we have its witness in the Quran as well as the Bible. And it's not only in the Quran; it is also in the Bible as well, that this will happen on the day of resurrection. Jesus, will say to the followers, those people who idolized him, say that, away with you, get away from me, something like along those lines. That we have also the verse in the Quran as a, as one of the footnotes. I think we have it in the Quran as well. MashaAllah.
Okay, and what was your other comment? You said you have other comments. We're talking about Matthew 7:21 through 23, by the way.
Oh yes, MashaAllah, yes, exactly. Yes, I have another comment, but allow me to read the rest of the verses, and inshallah I will talk about it. And also in verse 22, where we have Satan disowns his followers. And the devil will say, after the judgment had been issued, God has promised you the truthful promise, and I promised you, but I broke my promise. I had no power over you. I simply invited you, and you accepted my invitation. Therefore, do not blame me, and blame only yourselves. My complaining cannot help me. My complaining cannot help you, nor can your complaining help me. I have believed in your idolizing me. I have disbelieved in your idolizing me. The transgressors have incurred a painful retribution. And this is exactly like a quotation mark that has been witnessed by God on the day of resurrection, that Satan will say this to his followers. This is a prophecy, subhanAllah, that we have, in this Quran. And the day of resurrection hasn't come yet, but we have the exact account of what will happen on the day of resurrection. And on that day, Satan himself will disown his followers and will tell them that I had no power over you. I just simply invited you, and you accepted my invitation. And the promise of God was the truthful promise. But what he promised his followers, basically Satan, what he promised his followers, he broke his promise. And basically those who followed Satan are really stupid idiots. That followed Satan, and he tricked them into following them.
So I wanted to also comment on verses 32 through 34. I mean, these are all, well, also in 31 too, talking about spending in the cause of God and doing our contact prayers and spending, secretly and publicly. But also the following verses that talk about everything that God has created for us, all His blessings. It says in verse 34 that if we count God's blessings, we can never encompass them, because there's so many blessings. I mean, if you think about the whole setup just in this world, I mean, first of all, it's a great blessing from God that He has given us this chance to be here and didn't put us in hell, but not only that did he bring us here, but He also gave us so many blessings while we were here. This whole time, like, we're not appreciative. We take everything for granted. That's a human being. That's the nature of human being. But if you think about these things, a normal person, average person, never thinks about these things, right? He takes everything for granted, and like, you don't see an average human being, waking up in the morning and thanking God for giving him the the sun, and giving him the moon, right, as any kind of, they don't even think about it, and if they think about it, they only think about it in terms of science or physics, for example, right? But to think about it in the sense that God has given us all of these blessings to help us in this world. I mean, thinking about water, rain, the sea, how that helps. I mean, imagine all these goods that we get from all over the world, furniture and appliances and metal and all these different things that are, imported and exported every single day, are because God has created a sea. Imagine if that didn't exist. I mean, how far all those continents are for us to be able to get things from China and all these other countries, and God has put all these things in place for us on a daily basis. We just take it for granted. I mean, the sun is there for our service every day. It gives us light and warmth and food and water, gives us, and rain. I mean, all these things are there, and we just take these things for granted. All different kinds of things that we ask God for, eventually God gives them to us, and God is reminding us to be thankful for all of this, thankful for all the blessings that God gives to us. But the human being is transgressing and ignorant and unappreciative. I mean, all these are traits, human traits, being unappreciative. Obviously, if you were to appreciate these blessings, I mean, you would do your contact prayers, you would give your zakat, you would do everything to thank Him for all these things, right? I mean, like I said, I mean, we could all be suffering in hell right now. God didn't even have to create all of these things, but God knew that there were people among us that could be redeemed eventually, that could repent finally. There's a minority of the minority, and God gave us this chance, and He could have just put us in a prison. Even if we were to get another chance, He could have just put us in a prison and put us through some kind of a test designed differently. But He allowed us to have this beautiful earth and have all these beautiful fruits and blessings, of various kinds, so that we could appreciate God, so that we could worship Him, so that we could think about Him, And so it's good to be mindful of these blessings as we carry on, so that God can be on our minds, to remember all these blessings, because it's very easy for people to get distracted, by things that are happening around them and just lose focus, right? But these things can help us, remind us of God in whatever way. Obviously, we can think about God is good for us, right? But these things also help us to think about God. As you're eating, for example, thinking about this whole process that you get all these things magically for you, tomatoes and spices and everything else, meats, all these things. I mean, how, if God didn't create them, I mean, how could we possibly manufacture anything like that, right? Impossible. So thank God for everything.
MashaAllah, there is another, I think, important topic which was in these verses, which were, MashaAllah, read by Brother Justin today. And if we look at verse 28, they removed their families from God's protection. Have you noted those who responded to God's blessings by disbelieving and thus brought disaster upon their own families? So these are in actually audio number 27. If you want to actually look at it, you can look at them inshallah later. But I'm going to read from this part that, Dr. Khalifa mentions that, so we talked earlier this afternoon about the souls being assigned to certain homes. So if the people refuse to uphold God's commandments, God will assign evil souls to their houses. So that's one answer for if how is it the case that people remove their families from God's protection. If they don't pay attention to God's commandments, God will assign evil souls to their houses. And this is already, determined, basically, because God knows exactly what choices we have. And a person asks, how does this apply to the belief where one parent is believing and the other is disbelieving? And Dr. Khalifa said that it works both ways. The believer will get his or her way. You see, the believers get their way. And I am thinking of my own parents, where my mother was a believer and my father was not a heavy-duty idol worshiper. The father of Dr. Khalifa, we know that he was not a believer, and but his mother was a believer. And then he mentioned that my mother, basically, she was telling us always, God alone, the saints and the prophets are dead. You must trust in God alone, nobody else. And then she kind of gave up because we all ganged up on her with my father. So in other words, we didn't follow her. So we ended up and then he explains about, the kids, some of them believed, some of them did not believe, And then another person asked, if both parents are believers and true believers, is that a guarantee that the children will be believers? And then Dr. Khalifa says no. So even if both parents are believers, it's not a guarantee that the children would become, a believer, like a good child. Because we had that example in the Quran where Moses was accompanied by one of the servants of God, and he was supposed to be taught some lessons, that part that he accompanied that servant of God, and then there was one part that the servant of God, killed a child, and then said that Moses said, "Why did you kill that innocent child?" And said that the parents were believers, and then this child was to become to grow up and then become a bad person, and then it was the will of God that this child was dead, it was gone, and then another child was given to those parents. And if you think about it, so those parents were believers, and then that child was not a believer. But again, it was the mercy of God for the parents that child was taken away from them, and another child, which was a good child, was given to them. And still, it was a mercy of God upon that small child, that child, by mercy of God, went to lower heaven because that child was under the age of 40. So it's a win-win situation, for the parents, that they ended up with a good, believing child, and that child, which was supposed to be like a bad, probably, I don't know, annoying child or disbeliever, ended up by the mercy of God in the lower heaven, because it was under the age of 40. So subhanAllah, there is a lot going on, and inshallah, we need to think about them.
Yeah, Moshe, I also wanted to comment on the verses 24 through 27. And God talks about truth versus falsehood. So if you think about this allegory, mashallah, it's a beautiful allegory of, for example, how it talks about bad. It says, God said, good word is a good tree whose root is firmly fixed and its branches are high in the sky. An example of the bad word is that of a bad tree chopped at the soil level, it has no roots to keep it standing, right? So bad, I mean, if you think about, it's like a good tree whose branches are firmly fixed, you know, I mean, you think about it like, for example, the weeds that, you know, are, ends up, you know, invading a place with, you know, you have good fruits, right? And then you have these weeds growing in, you know, and then those are chopped at the soil level and easily taken out, you know. So this is the example of truth versus falsehood, and I mean the truth eventually stays and gives its fruit, you know, and the bad fruit, you know, doesn't, you know. And if you think about it also in terms of the rewards, you know, the good fruits will, the good tree will give its fruit, and you know, you will get your rewards eternally. But for the bad word, obviously, with the falsehood, you know, nullifies, you know, all your works. And so, mashallah, this is a great allegory in how God talks about. Also, this is the same example that God talks about the believers. You know, they're like the trees that grow taller and stronger and pleases the farmers, right? And enrages the disbelievers. So also there's a lot of emphasis on the contact prayers. You know, praise be to God, and these are I mean, there's contact prayers mentioned in verse 31, and then also verses, especially verses 40 through 43, as being gifts from God. Right? Most people look at contact prayers as chores, you know, but we shouldn't look at them as chores or things that we just have to do. You know, we should think about it as gifts from God, because really these, as the messenger of the covenant said, you know, this is like the main meal for your soul. This is steak and lobster. You know, steak and lobster is very heavy and nutritious. You know, gives you a lot of calories. You know, and so, you know, compared to, you know, people who say, no, we pray to God. We can pray to God anytime you want, which is, yeah, you can, but you know, that's just like snacks. But this is something that is divinely guaranteed by God, mathematically coded, you know, where you make the contact with God. You know, your contact prayer is not the same as any other prayer, right? It's mathematically composed, and it brings in a lot of energy for your soul, a lot of nutrition for your soul that helps you grow stronger quickly, you know. And if we just think about how badly we need these things, you know, we should be looking at them as gifts from God, you know. I mean, how crucial it will be for someone's soul to maybe have grown, maybe, you know, a little bit more than what they should have to just make it to purgatory, for example, you know, understand the value of each contact prayer, right? And God has given us these blessings. I mean, that that in itself is a blessing. I mean, it's one thing to appreciate God for the blessings and do your contact prayer, right? But the contact prayer itself is a blessing, you know, for you to be able to grow your soul, and nourishment that we badly need in this world where we're just constantly surrounded by whispers from the devils in the world of, you know, that is Satan's domain. We're constantly bombarded by his messages from all his constituents everywhere around us, you know, at that, and God has given us these contact prayers to survive through this and grow stronger, you know. So we should definitely thank God for that, and God willing, all believers make it their priority to do their contact prayers and appreciate them as they should be appreciated. Are there any other comments or questions from anybody? Any? We didn't really talk too much about off topic. So any off topic question anybody wants to bring up? If not, then God willing, we can conclude our study. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Brother Justin, for leading the study, and thank you for streaming. MashaAllah, God bless you all for participating. And God willing, our next English class would be on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. God bless you all.
Assalamu alaikum.
God bless you.